As you mentioned, the proliferation of the Republicans in the race, and you as the only significant Democrat in the race, it led lots of people, including people in many political science departments, to say he's leading now, but the Democrats will coalesce, the Republicans will coalesce, and the Republicans will win, because that's just been,
Right.
the history of Louisiana in the last 15 years. Right? But as the primary was ending, and as Vitter was fading, and as Angell was rising, the election may have been different a week or 10 days later. That must have been real interesting behind closed doors to.
Yeah, it was interesting. By that time we were polling, and I was able to see what was happening with my numbers, but with the other candidates' numbers as well. I personally did not believe that Vitter would fall out of the runoff, but that was the trend, and had it been another week or 10 days, I guess it would have been possible. This is, I guess, where we did get lucky, because I told you I wanted the spread between me and Senator Vitter to be as big as it could be, and he was falling going into the runoff, and so long as he stayed in the second place in the race, that's who I was going to face, and I'd have the biggest difference between my vote total and his that we could possibly have, and that's the way that turned out. And there was a lot of conventional wisdom about that, but the conventional wisdom was so strong it led some people to do some things that were, in hindsight, not very smart. I think Senator Vitter and his advisors believed all they had to do was to get in a runoff with me, and it didn't matter how they got there. And so he could afford to be as negative as he wanted to be towards Jay Darden and Scott Angell, because their voters would not vote for me, and he could do that. He overplayed his hand. There were a number of voters for Scott and Jay who just, at the end of that primary, could not vote for Senator Vitter, and I was able to pick up a number of those votes. The other critical thing about the separation is that it inspired people to donate money. I ran for 2.5 years before the primary election, raising every dollar that I could raise, and it was very difficult to raise money, and we did get into the 7 figures, but barely. When the runoff came, and that was in 2.5 years, but when the runoff came, and we raised less than $2 million. When the runoff came in 28 days, we raised $7 million. So that's the difference that it made, running first by a considerable margin. And when I saw how fast the money was coming in and where it was coming from, I absolutely knew at that point that we would win the race.